Hello from London, language learners, and it's time for my monthly Learning Japanese update. First of all, if you're new here, welcome. I'm Dr. Gareth Popkins. Here we talk about language learning from many angles, not only my own projects like today, but also reviews of language learning products. We talk about methods. I go to language learner events, and I do some travel vlogging as well with a language twist when I'm on the road, which of course I can't be at the moment, given I'm in the middle of the COVID semi-lockdown here in London. Now, I started learning Japanese at the beginning of last year in anticipation of my first ever trip to Japan, which took place in October, and I had a great time. Once I got back, it took me a while to get back into the routine, but I've re-established a regular study slot, usually in the morning, aiming to do, and this is what I've been doing this year in 2020, 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week on my Japanese. I'm a real believer in the power of habit in language learning, so I try and get that time under my belt at the beginning of the day before I start working or I start on other projects here with the vlog or over on howtogetfluent.com. Now, actually in April, I had a really good month. I managed to study every day, so I got to a total of 24 hours and 20 minutes clocked up during that month, during the 30 days of April. That actually averaged out at 48 minutes a day. One of the things I decided I wanted to do at the end of March was to have a satellite slot in the evening. It's an idea I've long thought's really profitable to reinforce what I'd done earlier on in the day. Maybe just 15 minutes or so before you go to bed. That didn't work most days last month. In fairness to me, that was because I was also putting in 30 minutes plus on my Basque, where I'm at an intermediate level. So that's my excuse anyway. But a satellite slot I still think is a good idea. But most of those averaged out 48 minutes were in one block, albeit varying the materials I was using during that morning study slot. The approach I'm taking on Japanese took a while to settle down, particularly in the early months last year when I wasn't sure whether I should try and learn the kanji characters based on the Chinese characters at the same time. In the end, I've decided to postpone those, apart from the small number 80, which are introduced in my current textbook, which is Japanese from Zero, Volume 3, my core textbook. I'll come on to that in a moment. But no, I haven't been working on the kanji. My philosophy is at the moment to try and get the basic structures of the language, to get a sense of how it all fits together, the nuts and bolts, and a core vocabulary. And before I feel confident in that, I haven't even started trying to speak the language yet, in contrast to the approach I took with my Basque, the last language I started in earnest, where I was very much speaking early and speaking often. So the Japanese know I'm not speaking much, I'm not listening much either yet because I just don't have the vocabulary to understand. And in my experience, if people are having problems with listening, one of the main reasons is simply they don't have enough vocab. No, I'm just working away solidly trying to get patterns, trying to get the grammar of the language. And I'm doing that, as I say, with the aid of textbooks. I'm a great fan of having one central course for your language learning, whatever level you're at, a textbook or the equivalent sort of online course. And mine is the Japanese from Zero series, which you'll have seen before if you've seen earlier videos in this Learning Japanese project. I'm now on book 3. And in the last month in April, I completed Unit 9 and began Unit 10 of the book. So I'm going rather slowly now through the book, but I think that's because I'm using other materials as well, which I'll come on to in a moment. In the last month then, there were some interesting new structures, the tai ending, which you can add on to verbs, which changes a verb from a statement, something you're doing, to something you want to do. So tabemasu, I'm eating or I eat. Tabetai is then I want to eat. So it's a simple change you can put on the end of a verb, very useful to change its meaning. Something else interesting which came up in the unit, in Unit 9, was ijo, meaning or above, as in $100 or more, as it were, or ika, or below, or less, or fewer. So 5 books or fewer, $5 or less, that sort of thing, to very useful additions. But there wasn't actually that much grammar in Unit 10. A good thing about the book is, Unit 9, wasn't it? A good thing about the book is that it does have a lot of conversationally based dialogues. So that is one reason I've stuck with the course, although the audio is difficult to access. The audio is actually on a website which you can access, but you have to pay extra to get some of the audio, and it's a bit fiddly, I found. So I've gone with another source of audio, which is, well, two actually. One is the Pimsleur audio course, which I've been listening to on my headphones as I jog round the park. So not focusing on it as you're supposed to do, and I would recommend you doing if it's your core course, but it is good in that it sort of prepared the ground for me for things I've come across in Japanese from zero. So, for example, this tai ending on the verbs, the I want to form, the want to form, I'd already come across because I'm on Pimsleur level 4 now. I started that in April, but back in level 2, actually, this tai was taught. So I'd heard it lots of times in Pimsleur, which really meant there was a flash of recognition when it came in Japanese from zero, and it was just a question then of reinforcing actually what I'd actually learned and seeing it written down. It works the other way too. So this ijo structure, meaning or above, so as I said, $10 or above, suddenly came up last week actually in Pimsleur, and I'd already done it in Japanese from zero. So again, because I was coming a second time round in a different context, there was a flash of recognition, and it seems to stick a bit more. I've also been using, from the start really, Assimil's Le Japonais, and during April I got from Unit 30, I did 31, 32, 33 and 34. The way I start with this course always is to do a dictation exercise. It's not a method that's recommended in the book, but because the audio is very good, it's a conversation. You get a dialogue at the beginning of each chapter around which everything's structured. And you have a transcript, so I use the MP3 audio which came with the course, and I will try and write down what I hear to prime me, to get me really listening in a focused way before I start to pull apart the text with the aid of the transcripts in Japanese, but also in French. I actually find the literal word-for-word translation in the French, because there are two, idiomatic French and then the word-for-word translation, really helpful, because the way the concepts are expressed in Japanese is so different from in French, or from what would be the case in English as well, that actually the idiomatic natural translation is not that helpful, because the Japanese diverges so strongly from it. So a word-for-word translation is actually quite a useful tool, I'm finding, from that book. Now, I reported back in March that I've also acquired a further course. That's this very old Teach Yourself Japanese course, which actually dates from the 1950s. I haven't got the audio. There was audio at the time published by Linguaphone on gramophone records. I've tried to find it on the net, not been able to find it. But I'm using the course very much to practice backwards and forwards translation exercises. It's a very classic grammar translation course, although with conversations, as I say, with the recordings originally made at the back of the book. But there's a lot of explanation. It's pretty technical. It's not one I'd recommend for people who are not really into the nuts and bolts of a language, and I think it's a textbook that it would be difficult to learn the language from alone. But if you do like grammar, and also you want a good reference work, because there's a good index at the back here, and there's also there are some quite useful tables in here as well, then this is one I think which could be quite useful. I'm doing at least the translations backwards and forwards, which there are quite a number in each chapter. But some of the grammar explanations are a bit heavy, I have to say. I've been warned as well that the language in the book is rather stilted, rather unnatural, but I think I will avoid contamination from that, given that the other materials that I'm using are so contemporary and so conversational. And to be honest, I'd be really glad if I had a sort of stilted, even a bit old-fashioned Japanese at this stage. With use and with practice, it will become, it seems to me, more natural. So that's what's been going on with my Japanese in April. In May, my aim is to keep going, basically, to keep going with the 30 minutes a day, 4 days, 5 days a week. The one thing I didn't manage to do in April was more flashcarding. I wanted to flashcard the vocabulary and phrases from Japanese from Zero, Book 2. That didn't really happen, partly I think because I was getting stuck into Teach Yourself Japanese. That's 30 chapters, by the way, in there, 30 lessons, and it covers all the structures you're going to need in the language. And I've got to the end of Unit 11 so far, which I think is pretty good going. Moving quite fast because I've actually covered everything so far in Teach Yourself Japanese. But if it keeps going at this pace and I keep working through it at this pace, before long I will be coming up against stuff I haven't met in Assimil or in Japanese from Zero, I expect. So anyway, that's what's going on. Keeping going in May. How's your language learning going? Are you learning Japanese? If so, what's your experience been? Is it different from mine? Are you speaking already? What materials are you using? What thoughts do you have about my approach? Do share in the comments below. As always, thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget, if you haven't yet already, subscribe for the vibe, think about a thumbs up, tickle that bell, and share the affair. See you next time.